My daughter-in-law's whisper hit the chapel speakers. That cheap clearance dress aimed at me, the widow, while cameras rolled at my husband's funeral. I didn't flinch. I folded my handkerchief, breathed, and let 67 years of backbone do the talking. Quietly, I took my assigned seat in row D, photographed the program that erased my name, and that night unlocked a records room no one knew I kept. That cruel word was only the first loose thread. Once I pulled it, policies, paperwork, and a carefully staged image began to come apart, and our family story would never look the same. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I arrived at the River Oaks Megachurch Chapel just after the bell struck 10, the Texas sun already sharp against the pale stone walls. The narthex smelled faintly of lilies and lemon oil. I signed the guest book with a steady hand and slipped Gannon's monogrammed white handkerchief into my palm, the cotton cool against my skin. Camera cranes hovered like mechanical herons, red tally lights blinking their silent judgment. I took a slow breath. Today was for honor, not spectacle, and I would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me falter. An usher approached, eyes fixed on the phone in his hand. Mrs. C, he began, stopping at the screen. For the live stream frame, we're moving a few guests for symmetry. Would you mind row D overflow? His voice wavered, but the text message on his screen was firm. I looked past him to the front pew where my name card had rested during rehearsal. My seat. Gannon's seat. I nodded once. Please give me a line of sight to the casket, I said, soft but clear. He handed me a small card marked Row D. I photographed it before sliding it into my purse. The printed program offered another quiet insult. Under family, my name was absent. Instead, on the final page, I found support staff Arlie C. I ran my thumb along the crease, then flattened the cover and took a photo with a timestamp. Evidence. Nothing dramatic, just proof. Gannon always said, answer theater with truth. My son Zeb finally approached his tie slightly askew, his eyes darting to the cameras. We'll fix it after Mom, he murmured, barely moving his lips. Behind him, Dahlia glided closer, immaculate in a dove-gray sheath dress. The camera favors symmetry, she whispered the corners of her mouth, lifting as if she were offering comfort instead of erasure. I looked at my son, then passed him to the casket. Silence was my reply. I opened the inner flap of the program and wrote 3 words in neat block letters: observe, record, remember. Folding the handkerchief over the creased cover, I felt a steadiness settle in my chest. I would not trade dignity for noise. I moved toward row D spine, straight each step, deliberate, the muted murmur of guests parting like low tide. When the hymn rehearsal ended, I walked the aisle toward the casket. The air was heavy with candle wax and memory. I brushed the handkerchief along Gannon's lapel seam, a small private salute. His voice echoed in my mind, answer theater with truth. I returned to my seat, the program a quiet witness in my hand. Across the chapel, the red light atop the primary camera blinked alive. A hush swept the room as the choir filed in. The minister raised his hands. I felt the weight of every lens, but kept my gaze on the man I had loved, the man whose absence filled the hall more powerfully than any camera could. Janelle slipped in beside me, her presence a calm anchor. She leaned close and offered her front row seat with a gentle smile. Stay, I whispered back, touching her hand. Warmth spread through the cold that had gathered around my ribs. I set my phone face down on the pew and lifted the handkerchief to my lips. The minister's voice rang out, but I heard only the sound of my own breath as I prepared for whatever came next. The red light pulsed once more, steady and bright, as if recording not just an image, but a promise. The hymn swelled through the River Oaks Chapel, each note stretching the hush to a fragile thread. The red tally light atop the main camera glowed steady, casting a quiet halo over the choir's poised faces. I held Gannon's handkerchief tight in my palm, the fabric warm now from my grip, and let the sound wash over me without moving a muscle. A sudden pop from the ambient mic cracked the stillness. Then Dahlia's whisper, meant for no one beyond her husband's ear, filled the speakers like a thin blade. That cheap clearance dress. The words echoed against marble and wood, startling a ripple of breath across the pews. Heads turned in small, startled motions. I kept my eyes forward and did not flinch. The murmurs gathered like a tide. Zeb's gaze dropped to his polished shoes, shoulders stiff. Janelle's jaw tightened her profile, a quiet defense. I counted 3 other faces in my row, their expressions registering what they'd heard. My cheeks burned, but my mind cooled with each measured inhale. Under the cover of the folded program, I unlocked my phone and tapped a quick note. Mike insult, 10:18 a.m. The screen's faint light reflected off the creased paper. No flash, no sound. Evidence secured nothing more. From the side pocket of my Bible, a small envelope peeked out, the one I had tucked there after Gannon's memorial service planning. I slid it free and unfolded his familiar script. Keep your dignity. Don't let them tell you who you are. The inked lines steadied my heartbeat. I pressed the note to my palm and exhaled until the tremor left my chest. I wrote 3 words beneath the earlier mantra on the program flap record. Verify. Wait. The pen barely whispered across the paper as I slid the note beneath the handkerchief. Silence was no surrender. It was the strategy he would recognize. The minister's eyes flicked toward the ceiling speakers. Without pause, he lifted his hand and guided the choir into the next verse, their voices rising to blanket the embarrassment. The service carried on as if nothing had happened, but I could feel the shift. The truth had already traveled the room. Janelle reached across the narrow gap and squeezed my elbow, once a quiet confirmation that she had heard and understood. Zeb never looked up, his face carved in stone. I let the silence between us speak for itself. My gaze returned to the casket, to the seam of Gannon's lapel I had traced earlier. The sweeping camera lens drifted past row D without stopping. I let it go, holding still in the gentle tide of music. Inside my head, I began the list. Itemize. Witnesses. Audio. Program. Seating card. Each word clicked into place like the turn of a key. I closed the Bible over Gannon's note, the quiet fire of resolve settling into my bones. The elevator doors whispered shut behind me as Monday's first light stretched across the Houston skyline. I walked the quiet corridor to my executive office, each step a steady drumbeat of purpose. In my hand, the index card from the funeral rested like a silent vow. At 8:15 a.m., I turned the key no one else possessed and opened the concealed door behind the credenza. Cool air slid out, tinged with the scent of paper that hadn't breathed in months. Fluorescent lights flickered to life, revealing rows of locked files and polished steel cabinets. This was the room where strategy began. I rolled out the first lateral file and pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer. Conduct reports, point-of-sale logs, and security camera stills weighted in careful order. The chill of the room sharpened my thoughts. This was not about fury. It was about precision. I wrote the date and time on the pad, underlining it once before setting it beside the files. Shannon arrived with quiet efficiency, a tablet in one hand and a sealable evidence pouch in the other. Chain of custody from the start, she said, her voice calm. We logged every folder, removed source handler time. Her initials joined mine on each line, a silent promise of integrity. The secure phone on the wall glowed. Velma's measured tone filled the room through encrypted static. Protected evidence requires redaction of junior staff names, she reminded us. We confirmed the scope and timeline, each word clipped and careful. This was not vengeance, it was policy, and I felt the gravity settle like a second skin. I opened the first pull of data, Dahlia's scheduled shifts, against zero-ring point-of-sale records. 3 separate blocks marked present, but without a single sale or customer assist. My pen pressed harder with each match. Controlled satisfaction pulsed beneath my calm. Next came the locker room stills. Time-stamped frames showed Dahlia posing with merchandise, never checked out, an open zipper bag at her feet. I let the images speak for themselves, resisting any whisper of triumph. Shannon cross-checked social media. Archived stories from clients revealed the same scarf, the same clutch, posted within the very hours the sales logs sat empty. Logic closed around us, tight and undeniable. We signed and sealed the packet initials scrawled across the flap and placed it into a fireproof pouch. No flourish, only quiet certainty. On the final line of my yellow pad, I wrote, "Luxury, ancient dignity. Audit for harm, not revenge." I underlined older clients' experiences until the paper deepened with ink. Ethics mattered more than any sting of insult. I reset the room, locked the pouch, and slipped a single index card into my pocket. Policy, signage, self-authorized artwork. By sundown, I would find her fingerprints on more than a handbag. The policy arrived as a PDF, its language neat, its bias louder than any shout. Velma's email landed at 4:37 p.m., subject line clipped and polite. Attached client presentation standards, author of Record D. Alvarez. I opened it and felt the temperature of the room change. The sentences wore a corporate smile, but the teeth showed. Reserve premium attention for guests aligned with brand aesthetics. Guide budget-conscious visitors toward value placements. Streamline front-of-house visuals for aspirational cohesion. It sounded like wallpaper until you pictured the people being steered women my age in comfortable shoes, men in off-the-rack jackets who still saved for anniversaries, widows in black who bought one excellent scarf to feel human again. I printed the PDF and brought out a highlighter. In the margins, I wrote what the document would not admit: proxy exclusion disparate impact training needed. I marked pages for retirement, added a note to footnote EEOC guidance, and circled phrases that turned staff into bouncers for status. Velma replied within minutes, steady as a metronome: proceed with analysis, compile remediation steps, no broadcast until findings complete. Shannon CC'd set up a folder and a checklist. We worked without heat, like nurses cleaning a wound. By 5:30, the light outside went soft and gold, and I walked into the flagship as a customer. No title, no announcement. I paused past the threshold and let the floor write its own report. Who did the nearest associate greet first? A young couple in sharp neutrals, who was redirected to the back wall marked seasonal values. A woman in a floral church dress, hair silver and perfect. I kept my hands at my sides and my mind on the ledger time aisle tone. Every choice had a ghost trailing it, the policy's careful euphemisms. Halfway down the central runway, I stopped. Beside my capsule collection, in clear acrylic, a standee rose from a brass base. The headline read, "Curated by Dahlia A." Her portrait smiled above a paragraph about elevated essentials for the modern eye. My initials on the design placard stared back from the shelf label beside it. There was no approval stamp, no routing tag, only her claim to authorship in the glow of the track lights. Anger flashed hot and quick, like a match you snuff between two fingers. I took the photo, the standee, the SKU cards, the design placard with my initials. I added one more frame with the whole vignette in view my reflection, small in the acrylic. I didn't make a speech. I pulled a canvas sleeve from my tote, the kind we use to protect signage in transit, and slid the standee inside. In its place, I set a modest white card artwork, pending brand approval. No flourish, no blame. The manager on duty watched from across the floor, measuring me, then the card, then the missing face. I gave her a nod that said, "This is not a fire, it is housekeeping." In the back office, the air smelled of paper and light toner dust. I asked for the signage approval binder. Tabs labeled Policy Visual Seasonal opened like a history book. Under Spring Capsule Curatorial, the requester and approver lines bore the same pen, D. Alvarez. No countersignature, no legal review. The routing sheet was as blank as a fresh snowfall. I took a photo of the page, then another with the binder's cover and today's date. Chain of custody begins where sloppiness ends. On my way back to the floor, a sales associate in her 30s angled toward a couple holding hands. "Let me show you something more." "Appropriate," she said, sweetness skimmed over judgment. The woman's smile thinned. I checked my watch, noted the aisle, and kept walking. Culture doesn't break in one moment. It drifts. You correct a drift by setting a true line and teaching people how to row. We sealed the standee in an evidence pouch at the cash wrap. I wrote the date, time, and location. The manager printed her name and countersigned. I offered no sermon, only a calm explanation. Unauthorized attribution requires documentation and review. She exhaled as if thankful the temperature was staying cool. Temperatures can be managed. Fires feed themselves. In a quiet corner, I drafted 2 things on my phone. First, a skeleton. Cease and desist for unauthorized attribution. Simple, clear, no grandstanding. Second, bullet points for an equal service mandate, standard greeting protocols, 3-path consultation scripts for any budget, a quarterly audit of floor interactions, and a mystery shop program with older clients prioritized. I added a line about reorienting incentives, measure care, not just ticket. We sell luxury, yes, but the heart of luxury is dignity. You don't teach that with a price gun. The store windows held the last of the copper light when I stepped back to the display. Without the portrait, the capsule looked like what it was, a small disciplined collection meant to make getting dressed easier for real lives. Grandmothers who still travel, teachers retired from classrooms, but not from grace women burying their husbands and trying to remember how to stand. I straightened one hanger and pressed the acrylic base a hair to the left. Order is a kind of kindness. At 6:52, I sent Shannon a summary with attachments, photos of the standee in place. Its removal, the binder pages, the floor notes, subject line, policy attribution, next employer verification. The next domino had already begun to wobble. A banker would knock in the morning to verify a promotion letter that never existed, and we would answer with facts, not volume. I tucked my phone away, thanked the manager, and walked out into the evening. Houston's heat had softened to a manageable warmth, the kind that lets you breathe deeply. I stood for a moment under the awning and let the day run back through me, the PDF smile that wasn't kindness, the standee's claim that wasn't earned, the sentence on my pad that kept my hand steady, audit for harm, not revenge. Inside, the associates were still folding, still greeting, still making choices. Tomorrow, we would help them make better ones. The door closed behind me with a soft click. I felt the weight of the evidence pouch in my bag and the promise of accountability in my spine. Across the glass, my reflection looked back a widow in a plain black dress, hairpin, shoulders set. Whatever Dahlia had believed at the funeral about the price tag on my clothes, she would now learn something more expensive, truth-documented, and patient outlasts theater. I stepped into the copper light with the kind of quiet you can build a bridge on. The building was still dim when I unlocked my office at 7:45 a.m. I set a fresh mug of coffee beside the evidence pouch from yesterday and opened a blank call log template on my laptop. The silence felt watchful, like the pause before a conductor lifts the baton. Shannon slipped in quietly and placed a notepad on my desk, the top sheet labeled in her precise handwriting, verification script. The word itself carried a low hum of unease. I breathed in the steam from the mug and steadied my pulse. Today, the truth would not need me to raise my voice. At 8:12, the phone rang with the neutral chime of an outside line. Shannon glanced at the display and mouthed, "Bank." She routed it to the recorded line and nodded once. "Good morning, this is Leonard Price from Gulf Coast Mortgage," a measured male voice said. "We're calling to verify the employment status and recent promotion of Ms. Dahlia Alvarez, listed as junior manager as of April 10th. A small spark of vindication moved through me, sharp and clean. "Mr. Price," I replied, "could you provide the date of the letter you received and the name of the signatory on that promotion?" He cleared his throat. "Signed April 10th by, looks like Human Resources, Velma C." His uncertainty hung like a loose wire. "I can confirm," I said evenly, "that all promotion letters come directly from HR with 2 executive counter signatures. No such letter has been issued for Ms. Alvarez." The spike of the moment passed through me like a current, leaving a steadier calm. Mr. Price hesitated. "For our records, may we request written confirmation?" "Of course," I answered. You'll have an HR-verified statement by end of day." There was a pause, then a lower tone. "The applicant's mortgage file lists this promotion as the basis for future income." I kept my voice measured. "Please rely on HR's written verification, not an unverified letter." My own words felt like a soft door closing, final but not cruel. After the call ended, I dictated a 2-paragraph confirmation letter, concise, neutral, time-stamped. Velma's name joined mine in the CC line along with compliance. I attached an excerpt of the official promotion policy for clarity. Shannon proofread, converted the document to PDF, and at 9:05 a.m., pressed send. We logged the request ID and time in the verification folder. The evidence pouch on my desk no longer felt like a weight. It felt like ballast. By late afternoon, the office air had thinned into the quiet that follows a task completed. Still, a tug of unfinished business pulled me downtown. At 4:10, I stepped into the boutique's cool lighting and drifted toward a tie wall. Dahlia stood at the counter laughing with a friend, her phone face up beside the register. My own heartbeat slowed into an even metronome. The screen lit, and the moment sharpened. A notification banner slid across the glass, "Mortgage conditional approval pending employer verification." The laugh faltered, caught mid-note. She palmed the phone quickly, but not before the words had burned themselves into the air between us. I turned to the floor manager and asked, "Would you mind checking if the silk ties have been restocked?" I did not glance at Dahlia. No need. On my way out, I paused just long enough to speak one sentence, my voice calm and adult. "Be sure your paperwork matches your reality. No name, no scene. Only the truth offered like a door she could still choose to open." Back at the office after dusk, I filed the new bank verification beside the policy and attribution folder. 2 slim binders each, a quiet testament. On a yellow card, I wrote a single reminder for what lay ahead. Family dinner. Observe dignity breaches. The ink dried as the city lights flickered on outside my window. The next test would not come from a bank. It would come from blood. The smell of charred oak and buttered rolls wrapped around me as I stepped into Pappas Brothers Steakhouse at 6:30 p.m. The host guided us toward a corner booth that promised quiet, the low lamps casting a warm glow on dark leather. Aunt Laverne arrived first, her Sunday cardigan buttoned to the top and a strand of soft pearls resting at her collar. For a moment, the evening felt almost gentle. I imagined a calm meal where conversation might outshine judgment. Dahlia's gaze swept over Laverne's cardigan as we settled. "Maybe the lighting is unforgiving for knitwear," she said lightly, her lips curving into a polite smile. "Let's ask for a side table better for pictures." I kept my own smile steady, but a prickle of apprehension climbed the back of my neck. When the host returned with menus, Dahlia added, "Actually, perhaps Auntie would be more comfortable near the bar. It's less formal." Her tone carried the soft precision of someone issuing a quiet eviction. The host's eyes flicked between us, uncertain. I folded my napkin once, then met his gaze with a calm I had practiced for decades. "We'll all keep the booth, thank you," I said, warmth layered over steel. Dahlia's chair scraped the floor as she stood. "Auntie let me set you up with a cushioned seat near the window. More flattering light." Zeb half rose, then sank back down. I placed a gentle hand on Laverne's sleeve and gave it a reassuring pat. She stayed seated, eyes wide but unflinching. I turned to the server so everyone could hear. "Our dress code is kindness," I said evenly. "The booth suits us." The host nodded once and quietly reset the silverware. A hush fell over the table, the kind that lets truth land without a single raised voice. In the wall mirror, I caught Dahlia's quick eye roll, a flick of irritation she must have thought hidden. Janelle's chin lifted slightly, her reflection offering silent solidarity. I ordered for Laverne Prime Rib Medium Rare, while she whispered a soft, grateful "thank you." Dessert arrived in the form of warm pecan pie, its scent rich with brown sugar. Dahlia set down her fork and smiled with practiced sweetness. "You know, she said Mom would thrive in a community, more activities, supervised care, on-brand amenities. It could be wonderful for her." I set my spoon carefully on the table and looked at Zeb. Is this how you see me?" Zeb stared into his coffee. Silence heavy between us. Jonelle broke it with a clear, steady voice. "Mom isn't a brand asset," she said. Aunt Laverne adjusted her cardigan and murmured, "I like my cardigan." Her quiet dignity filled the space more than any speech. I tipped generously and told the host as we stood, "Thank you for seating us together." To the table I added, "Where I live is my decision." My tone held calm, certainty. The storm folded neatly inside. Outside, under the sodium lights of the parking lot, the night air cooled the heat in my chest. I drew out my phone and texted Shannon confirm training gaps on age bias. Schedule HR prep, Thursday. The message sent with a soft chime, a quiet promise of the next step. I inhaled the crisp air that contained storm within me, settling into purpose. The morning light slid across my office desk, soft and deliberate, as if it knew today would speak louder than I ever could. At 9 sharp reception placed a manila envelope in my hands. My name, Arliss, was written in a careful script that carried both dignity and tremor. Inside a single sheet of cream stationery unfolded like a quiet plea, an elder client, recounting how a sales associate guided her to sale racks, only each sentence marked by a bruised grace. Empathic sorrow filled me, but beneath it, a protective instinct tightened like a drawstring. I read the letter aloud to myself, the words, steady, unembellished. I left feeling less than human. The syllables floated into the still air, and I felt the weight of a story that demanded more than sympathy. I date-stamped the page, scanned it into our records, and placed my initials neatly along the margin to establish chain of custody. My quiet ache sharpened into focused intent. An hour later, a young nurse arrived during her lunch break, scrub sleeves rolled high on her forearms, fatigue etched under her eyes. She signed her own statement with a quick, determined hand describing how she'd been told premium rooms are by appointment. Her courage lifted the room's pulse. Moral heat rose in me, tempered by deep respect for her willingness to speak. I explained their privacy choices with care. Both women chose to keep their names on file but requested anonymized public records. I attached the signed consent forms to each statement, ensuring the boundary between witness and spectacle stayed firm. Composed advocacy steadied my voice as I thanked them for trusting the process. Later at the boutique, I handed copies of the statements to Maura, our store manager, in the quiet of her back office. She read them slowly, her throat tightening as she exhaled. "We'll own this," she said, her eyes reflecting a sober solidarity that needed no further vow. With a small notebook in hand, I walked the sales floor. I timed the seconds before a plainly dressed customer received a greeting. I noted who was guided toward clearance racks and who was ushered toward couture. Each observation landed with clinical focus, my restrained anger cooling into data. By mid-afternoon, back at my desk, I uploaded both statements into the HR case portal, tagging the file service bias client impact and linking it to the evidence gathered in earlier chapters of this quiet audit. The act of clicking submit carried a spike of energy, a procedural trigger that promised accountability. Velma's reply arrived within the hour, a 10-day remediation plan, mandatory retraining, and mystery shop audits. The store was officially marked monitored. I felt calm confidence settle over me, like a well-fitted coat. Before leaving for the day, I wrote brief thank you emails to the 2 women affirming the action underway, without offering promises beyond what policy could hold. Warm steadiness guided each word, closing the loop, without drama. On the yellow pad that has become my private ledger, I inscribed a single line. When they spoke for themselves, the room listened. Beneath it, I underlined 3 more words. Audit protects dignity. The ink dried into resolve, carrying me toward the next escalation with a quiet certainty. Make room, she's influential. The voice hit the glass like a fingernail, bright and entitled, as I stepped through the flagship doors at 4:45. The AV rig hummed above the marble cables taped in careful snakes. Rope stanchions drew a velvet border through the foyer, turning openness into lanes. Outside, a warm front pressed evening light into the windows. Inside, the air smelled of cedar hangers and new leather. An older patron hair set soft as frosting waited patiently just behind me with a folded invitation. She shifted her weight, then smoothed her skirt as a woman in a camera-ready sheath swept past us, trailing perfume and certainty. The greeter, anxious smile clipboard clutched, checked a list with red stars. Preferred client access. The header read in thick font. I watched her finger trace down the names like a metronome for status. "We'll text you when it's less crowded," she told, the elder voice pitched kindly and firm. The woman nodded as if agreeing with weather. I made a note in my ledger, the exact phrasing, the timestamp glowing from the foyer clock. Moral heat rose in me, careful and controlled. I breathed it down where I kept everything that wouldn't serve me on the surface. Across the sales floor, a foam board perched on an easel like a debutante. Evening Preview, curated by Dahlia A. The letters were generous and self-sure. The lower edge was bare, where our corporate approval stamp should have been. Stage lights skimmed our new capsule, turning silk into small moons. My anger cooled into geometry sign place, absence of stamp, camera angle, chain of custody later. I photographed nothing yet. Sometimes a picture belongs to the end of the sequence, not the beginning. Dahlia lifted a mic, smiling into the Fresnels. "Tonight we'll prioritize on-brand silhouettes," she said, the consonants polished. The AV tech nodded at his slider board, happy to have sound with personality. I wrote on-brand silhouettes beside 5:06 p.m. Coded language travels better than a shout. It leaves fewer fingerprints and more harm. I thought of the nurse's careful signature that morning and the elder client's trembling script. I imagined their sentences placed on this floor like bright cones. The staff would have to walk around from now on. At the stanchions, the older patron tried again. I received an invitation, she told the greeter, lifting the card like proof of life. "Our elevated room is at capacity," the associate said, glancing at the clipboard. "Clearance is open until 8. The words landed in the air and stayed there, visible to anyone willing to admit they could see. I kept my body still, eyes on Maura across the room. She caught my look and did not turn away. I moved without hurry. "Ma'am," I said to the elder, "let me find you a chair where you can see the capsule." I opened the velvet rope with an easy hand and offered my arm. In the elevated room, a narrow sanctuary trimmed in walnut, I asked Maura for water service, then requested a consultant to bring 3 looks in her size. Maura's eyes held mine for a beat, I understand. The older patron settled into the seat like a passenger finally boarding the correct train. Someone dimmed the light above us. The room exhaled. Backstage, a runner hustled by with a matte garment bag labeled Influencer Loan. The POS monitor on the accessory counter flashed idle blue. I leaned casual as a mother over homework and saw the comp log line blank. No checkout, no signature, no return by date. I looked at the clock and placed the moment inside my head's camera. Tight satisfaction, never gloating. This would live inside an audit, not a speech. Dahlia drifted to the edge of the crowd mic, lowered and tipped toward the influential wife with a sisterly smile. "We're keeping out the thrift energy tonight," she said, as if sharing a secret about appetizers. 2 clients within arm's reach, both women in their 40s with practical shoes, looked at each other, then at me. I didn't gift the moment a frown or a lesson. I let it settle where witnesses keep things safe. I stepped into the back office and asked the floor lead for the access list. For manager review, I said tone even. She handed over a photocopy and pointed to the red stars. I initialed the corner, then requested a duplicate of the foam board language for event records. "Our approvals need to be visible," I added and kept my voice gentle. When a culture is already brittle, you don't tap the glass, you change the temperature. From the stockroom door, I emailed Velma and compliance photos of the list header, the foam board text, the garment tag time codes matched to the mic language. Subject line, after hours, preview, immediate audit. I CC'd Maura and attached the training outline we'd drafted for service bias. The message was short and dry, a riverbed, holding facts that would carry their own weight when the water rose. I returned to the elevated room. The consultant had brought 3 looks in silk and 1 in a soft tweed. The older patron had water in a short glass and a steadier face. "They feel beautiful," she said, a little surprised at her own smile. "Good," I told her. "That's the only measure that matters." Across the floor, Dahlia performed in a ring of cameras, her grin pushed wide by light. I felt nothing about that. I had replaced feeling with plan. As the evening thinned, I met Maura at the stanchions. "Managers meeting Friday at 10, I said. "Bring the access protocol, comp log, and mic policy." Her nod carried relief and readiness. I slid my yellow card from my pocket and wrote those same 3 items in block letters. When I stepped out, the heat of the day had softened into a forgiving dusk. I could see my reflection in the doors, a widow in a dress that had been mocked on a hot mic, a mother who still loved a son who had not yet remembered himself an executive, carrying a simple index card the way others carry a shield. Outside, the influential wife waited for her car, the elder patron for her receipt, and the rest of Houston for its nightly shift change of light and noise. I walked past the rope where people had been sorted and felt the quiet satisfaction of gravity returning to its rightful direction. Theater had taken the stage tonight, but record had kept the books. On Friday, a room of managers would sit, a microphone would obey its owner, and the truth finally would wear the right name tag. 10 sharp, the door breathed shut, and the room settled into the soft hush of fabric and paper. I placed Gannon's white handkerchief beside the speaker, a small square of decency on a polished table. Shannon stood behind the laptop, testing the recorder with a fingertip tap that came back as a gentle thud through the ceiling speakers. Legal pads opened, pens laid flat. On the far monitor, compliance flickered into a tidy grid counsel, a paralegal, a note-taker. Velma's square steadied, and she gave me the nod that meant, "Begin as you intend to finish." "Our agenda is 3 lines," I said. "Policy alignment, evidence review, remediation, and discipline." I let the words sit where everyone could reach them. Counsel confirmed the session was being recorded for accuracy. No dramatics followed. We were not building a bonfire. We were drawing a map. Exhibit A lit the screen. Client Presentation Standards, the PDF I had received Monday. My highlighter bled cautious gold across phrases like, "Reserve premium attention for guests aligned with brand aesthetics." I spoke of disparate impact as simply as I could when a policy says one thing and does another, until the same faces always wait longer, end up at the clearance wall, leave sooner than they meant to. Brand risk was not a mood, it was a calculation. I kept my voice level and my back straight. I did not look at Dahlia. Exhibit B followed the photos of the clipboard at the door and the acrylic standee declaring, "Curated by Dahlia A," without approvals. Maura leaned forward, jaw set. No sign-off existed, she said, and the statement landed like a stone in a bowl of water ripples, moving outward to every manager who had ever signed a form, knowing forms are the bones of a store. I watched the ripples cross faces and then flatten. No one reached for justification. Good. We were done with smoke. Exhibit C needed no adjectives. I pressed play. From the preview night, Dahlia's voice slid into the room, clear, confident, amplified by equipment designed to flatter. "Tonight, we'll prioritize on-brand silhouettes." On the bottom corner of the video, the date burned. Next to it, a timestamp. I did not add comment. Silence drew a clean outline around the sentence, and in that outline, everyone could already see the shape of what it had done on the floor. Exhibit D was smaller and worse. The short clip captured the aside she thought was private. "We're keeping out the thrift energy tonight," Dahlia said, leaning toward a guest just off camera. In the conference room, a manager exhaled, with a sound like a tire giving up its last bit of air. Velma wrote something in her notebook and underlined it twice. I did not look down at the handkerchief. "When you lift your eyes for truth, you leave them up." Dahlia asked to respond. I granted the floor with a hand. Brand elevation, she began, voice controlled. Positioning product aspirationally, protecting the capsule from dilution by. She stopped gauging the room, choosing a safer synonym. Mixed signals. No one saved her. She tried again, circling the words as if they were a tight parking space. We need an ideal for people to approach. She said it like a kindness. It was not. Then came the slip as unremarkable as a breath and just as revealing. She turned toward the manager on her right and muttered, forgetting the tabletop mic was live. This is sabotage by a grieving widow. The waveform on Shannon's screen crested. Compliance raised a hand. For the record counsel, said voice even, could you repeat the phrase you just used? Dahlia's eyes flicked to me and away. I'll clarify later, she said. Noted counsel replied and clicked a marker on the digital transcript. I let the quiet sit. You cannot teach dignity if you rush. I took 2 pages from a folder, consents on file, and read a single line from each. The elder client I left feeling less than human. The nurse I wasn't allowed to try. I put the pages back. We were not going to pour more pain into the room than the room needed to learn. The managers looked at the table, the screen, their own notes. No one looked at the door. Velma outlined HR pathways with the care of a surgeon talking to a family. 2 lanes, she said. Final warning with probation contingent on training completion and behavioral audit, or termination for cause. For the store, mandatory retraining surprise audits, centralized signage control and elimination of any access list not generated by corporate CRM. She met each manager's eyes in turn. This is about dignity and liability. It is also about who we are on ordinary Wednesdays. Maura cleared her throat. I'll brief the floor at 2, she said. We'll own the retraining. I want associates to understand the why, not just the words. A manager across from her nodded with a relief that looked like resolve waking up from a long nap. Shannon typed her nails, making a small rhythm against the keys, a record of people choosing. Dahlia leaned back, folding her arms the way young people do when they believe their bodies can form armor. You're making an example of me, she said. I did not let the sentence travel. We're following policy, I answered, and drawing a boundary that should have been felt without policy. I kept my voice unadorned. She opened her mouth and closed it again. There is a point where the room stops debating your intentions and begins measuring your effects. Compliance reviewed the timeline for documentation. Velma proposed the terms of a final warning, 6 months probation, immediate removal from event ownership, restriction from hiring influence vendors, remedial training completed within 10 business days, weekly coaching logged. And if the mortgage lender calls again, a manager asked careful to keep his tone neutral. They will receive standard verification, I said. Facts, not commentary. I would not hang a career on a public hook. I would also not let anyone staple lies to our letterhead. I set the handkerchief's edge beneath my palm and spoke the close. At 4 o'clock today, compliance will sweep the floor with me for signage and access controls. At 2, Maura briefs. HR notices will issue by end of day. I let my eyes touch the corners of the room, each face for half a beat. Thank you for choosing the hard version of care over the easy version of theater. The managers rose with chair scrapes that sounded like a page turning. Shannon stopped the recording and slid a copy of the audio to Compliance's secure folder. We gathered our papers with the small noises of adults doing something unpleasant and necessary. Dahlia stayed seated a moment longer, watching the empty screen as if it held a friend's face. When she finally stood, she did not look at me. That was fine. Accountability does not require eye contact, it requires behavior. In the hallway, Maura caught my sleeve, then thought better, and let the fabric go. We'll make it right, she said. Not perfect right. I believed her. Perfection has a rich person's accent. Right has work boots. Back in my office, I folded the handkerchief and put it into the pocket of my jacket. Grief moved in me, the way a tide moves, predictable, patient, uninterested in permission. I looked at the yellow pad on my desk and wrote a line under today's date, Answer Theater with Truth. Gannon's maxim as serviceable as ever. Beneath it, I added, Protect the customer, protect the staff, protect myself. By late morning, the grid of compliance had shrunk to a single email confirming the sweep. I stood at the window and watched Houston go about its noisy, ordinary business. Trucks leaned on their horns. A woman in a bright blazer laughed into her phone. Somewhere across town, a bank server delivered an automated message to a son who used to wave his spoon like a baton at the kitchen table while I pretended to be an orchestra. Consequences were leaving the boardroom and walking toward my house. At 11:30, I shut off the lights in the conference room, straightened the chairs, and took one last look at the speaker I had carried through a week of lies and hymns. I slid the handkerchief beneath it for a second, then took both with me. Some objects travel, some stay and listen. This one had done enough listening. I locked the door and stepped into the brighter noise of the hallway. There was still work to do, forms to issue, signage to retire, a floor to retrain. There was also a doorbell in my near future, and a young man's face more complicated than any policy PDF. I touched the pocket where the handkerchief rested and felt steadier than I had at the start of the week. By afternoon, the systems would be in motion. By evening, the story would come home. The day carried August heat, though the calendar said spring. Zeb stood in my doorway with his phone raised like a burden. They froze the loan, he said. I let him in, set 2 mugs on the kitchen table, and slid out a yellow pad. Coffee steadied the room. Paper made it honest. He pushed the phone across the wood. Subject line, pending employer verification. Inconclusive. I read the body aloud so the words couldn't hide later. Employment verification does not confirm promotion. Debt to income exceeds threshold. Additional documentation required. His jaw worked once. We were supposed to close next Friday. I drew 2 boxes on the pad, facts and feelings, and wrote under the first. We'll start here, I said. Feelings could wait. Creditors never do. I scrolled. A line referenced a letter confirming promotion to junior manager, a letter that existed only in hope and pixels. The spike of anger that tried to rise met steel and found no purchase. All right, I said. Let's see the whole picture. I listed his net income, rent, the car note minimums on revolving balances, the gym streaming bundles, daycare he still helped with. I subtracted in neat columns. The sum circled itself into a negative that looked shallow but spread everywhere. We looked at it together. Nobody spoke. Truth didn't need echo. He rubbed the heel of his hand over his eye. I co-signed, he said syllables like a lock clicking. She said the raise was coming. 2 envelopes came from his jacket statements with my address. 2 new cards near their limits, both opened in his name to build household credit. Dates aligned too neatly with the day the fake promotion was supposedly drafted. My pen ticked, dates balances interest. You'll pull all statements for 6 months, I said. We'll build a repayment plan that doesn't pretend. The steakhouse returned as a picture. Aunt Laverne's pearls, the cardigan. Dahlia called unforgiving the gentle way humiliation wears taste. I put my palm on the wood. Where I live is my decision. I said, meeting his eyes. Your job is to keep your word. Yours, not hers. He nodded, recognizing the line between responsibility and rescue. I tapped speaker and called Jonelle. We're doing numbers, I said. Her voice carried sunlight. Mom stands where the floor is level, she said. We adjust the furniture around that. Zeb let out a breath that almost became a laugh. I hear you, he told her. We kept the call short. Relief and resolve cool if you talk them to death. I slid a white envelope from beneath the pad. On the front, in my hand, succession conditional. He looked at it like a test. Open it, I said. Inside a training schedule, a plain language ethics clause, and a single bold line, respect first. This isn't a gift, I said. It's a path. You may walk it if you can stand straight on it. He held the papers with both hands as if heat could travel. I can try, he said. The words were small and adult. Some truths you hold back, some you owe. I own the company, I said, as gently as power allows. Not a slice, the whole of it. Corrective actions began this week. I am both your mother and your employer's chief executive. Can you live with that? He looked up so quickly the chair creaked, then nodded slower. I always knew you worked harder than anyone, he said. I just didn't know how much of the weight was yours. His phone chimed, lighting the undersides of our faces. A text from Dahlia, a JPEG of a letter dressed up to look official. The logo sat half a line too low. The signature was my stamp from another document. Metadata pinged yesterday. She had misused the HR footer, the kind of mistake people make when they think branding is a bracelet. I saved the image to the evidence folder labeled loans and typed a note S13 doctored screenshot. No adjectives. Facts stand taller without them. Is she going to be arrested? He asked, staring at the broken logo. I'm not a prosecutor, I said. I'm a steward. HR will meet with her Monday. The bank will receive verification that contains only truth. Outcomes will follow choices, not my temper. His shoulders fell. Gratitude and grief braided together. We stepped onto the porch because the kitchen needed new air. Evening made up its mind. A mockingbird practiced borrowed songs on the neighbor's wire. I handed him a list in my square handwriting. Disclosures to bank today. Freeze cards, repayment plan by Sunday. Monday, HR at 10. Bring her, bring truth. At the bottom, I'd added a pocket line. We are fixers, not hiders. He read it twice. What if she refuses? He asked. Then she refuses the future, I said. You can still choose yours. He put the succession envelope in his shirt pocket like a passport. I'm sorry, he said the useless phrase that sometimes is the only good one. I know, I said. Be better. That's the only interest I'll accept. He nodded and stood. Halfway to the car, he turned back. You looked good in that dress, Mom, he said, voice rough. You looked good in it then. I smiled because it was too late to cry and too early to laugh. Tell your wife the same advice I gave you, I said. Make the paperwork match reality. When he was gone, I sat a while with the list in my lap and the porch light not yet on. Across town, a compliance report finished rendering. Somewhere else, a mortgage algorithm changed a field from green to gray. I went inside and washed our mugs without hurry. The house smelled like coffee and copy paper, ordinary things that have rescued more families than any grand gesture. On the table, the yellow pad waited for a last line. I wrote answer theater with truth. Protect the house. I capped the pen and slipped Gannon's handkerchief back into my pocket. Monday would bring stilettos and certainty. I would bring a chair and silence. Between those four things, the truth would find its height. Closed door open. Ledger. Dahlia arrived like a person entering a verdict heel's crisp chin set. I stood but did not offer a hand. I pointed to the chair beside Velma. The door sealed with a soft click. Shannon set water by my right hand and a slim folder by my left. On the wall, the compliance window came alive. Velma pressed record. Phones in the lockbox, Velma said. We placed them in lids, snapped keys on the table. Ground rules, short and plain scope, is document. Authenticity and client conduct. One speaker at a time. The recording is the record. No character trials. Dahlia watched me through reflections the chrome door handle the dark screen. I folded Gannon's handkerchief once and laid it flat. Shannon mirrored the first file. The JPEG filled the monitor, our letterhead, except our letterhead does not wander. My title without the comma, a footer from a long-retired flyer, a timestamp from yesterday afternoon. Subject promotion to junior manager. I kept my voice even. Our firm does not issue employment letters with this footer. It was a PDF someone forwarded, Dahlia said to the middle of the table. I saved it wrong. Shannon advanced. Compliance zoomed into a yellow constellation near the margin. Printer microdots every modern color laser, leaves them like freckles. The serial mapped to our back office unit, not headquarters, and the encoded time read 6:42 p.m. Friday. Velma held up the service card for that machine. Same serial. This was not forwarded, she said. It was produced. Dahlia tried another step back. Could be a copy. I was under pressure. We're closing. Everyone expected. The rest fell away when Velma tapped a key. A voicemail played flat and honest. Dahlia's voice. Hey, can you mock up the promotion letter like last quarter's? Use the HR template and I'll handle the sign. Need it tonight. Date and time stamped. Caller ID visible. The junior who received it routed the message to HR because she didn't know what else to do with a pit in her stomach. We let the silence after the beep say the thing no one wanted to say aloud. Bank on speaker, I said. Velma dialed the officer handling verification. He confirmed receipt of an email from Dahlia's address with the JPEG attached. Their system flagged it after our denial. We've paused pending a clean employer letter, he said. We appreciate the cooperation. I thanked him and ended the call. I faced Dahlia directly. You may explain, I said, not attack. Explain. She offered stress timing and a phrase she favors brand elevation as if aspiration could bleach facts. I wrote 2 words on my yellow margin, not credible. Velma read the findings like a level held to a wall. Falsification of an employment document, misuse of company equipment, attempted submission of false information to a lender, prior pattern of client bias conduct with remediation orders ignored. She breathed, then read the outcome termination for cause effective today. Compensation ceases as of last shift. Company property due by 5. Rehire ineligible. Notice of rights to follow. Dahlia's chair creaked. This is a widow's vendetta, she said almost lightly like a whistle in the dark. I didn't answer. Velma slid an envelope across the table. Neutral reference waiver, she said. Sign and third-party checks get only dates and title. In exchange, you acknowledge the findings and refrain from disparagement. Lawful, optional. Dahlia stared, then pushed it back with 2 fingers. Keep it. Shannon stood to retrieve the lockbox. We reclaimed our phones. The room felt larger after Purpose was finished with it. I folded the handkerchief and nodded once to Dahlia because I am my own weather. A storm would not serve me. Velma ended the recording. Compliance blinked away. In the hallway, the air smelled like toner. I texted my son, outcome final. Bank may call, meet me at home after work. He replied with 2 words, thank you, that earn their place by arriving rarely and meaning all of themselves. To Velma, schedule staff briefing. Ensure support for the junior who sent the voicemail. To Shannon, file closed. Begin service training rollout. Her checkmark felt like a hinge moving. In the elevator, I let the mirrors divide me into 4 panes past future mother executive and tried them on in turn. Power must be held like a cup firm, not white-knuckled, steady enough that people drink and taste only water. The descent gave me a minute to breathe. At the lobby doors, I looked out at Houston's pewter sky. Justice on paper is tidy. Justice at a kitchen table asks more of the heart. The first was finished. The second would begin at dusk with takeout boxes and a son who needed a different kind of courage. I slid the envelope with the neutral reference offer back into the folder, not because I thought she would ask for it, but because keeping records whole is part of how you keep yourself whole. I walked to my car without hurry. Somewhere behind me, a printer cooled its tiny yellow stars, asleep in the next page it would tell on. I am not my daughter-in-law's judge. I am the steward of a house, a brand, and a family name. Today I chose the kind of truth that stands up in rooms with microphones and rooms with quiet. Tonight I would need the other kind, the one that stands up in a kitchen, where the ledger is people and the audit is love. Before I pulled out, I dictated one last note into my task list: Monday staff briefing. Wednesday, mystery shop rotations. Friday, client listening hour. Systems, not speeches. Dignity, not theater. I set the handkerchief on the passenger seat, a square of white against the dark, and turned toward home. Steam curled above the kitchen table as Zeb set down cartons of lo mein and an apology that trembled like the chopsticks in his hand. I laid my yellow pad between us and rested Gannon's white handkerchief on top. One full conversation, I said. Then we start again. He nodded, shoulders slumping the evening air thick with salt and quiet. At 6:42, his phone chimed. The lender's message was blunt. Application denied, falsified documentation attempt, and debt to income failure. Zeb winced past the phone to me. I read every word aloud, each syllable, a small stone. No raised voices, no pity. Forward it to my archive, I said. We keep a clean record. I drew 3 short lines on the pad. Transparency, separate finances, counseling, boundaries, not punishments. If any line breaks, I will not underwrite a rescue. Zeb took the pen and signed without argument. Ink dried before the silence did. The next call belonged to work. Velma's voice carried steady authority. Company-wide compliance letter sent bias, retraining surprise audits, comp loan ban vendor audit calendar posted. The arc of months folded into a simple sentence. Thank you, I said, and ended the call. Relief felt like a clean ledger. A knock at 7:40 brought peach cobbler and warmth. Jonelle hugged her brother first. We start where the floor is level, she said. We ate in companionable quiet, the sugar and cinnamon turning the kitchen into something like repair. When dishes were rinsed, I slid a badge across the table. Associate trainee, Zeb, with a rotation chart from stockroom to client care. I'll earn it, Mom, he said, voice low but certain. Hope edged with duty settled between us like the scent of the cobbler. 2 weeks later, Friday 4:30, I stood in the flagship's back hall as the board's culture reset memo went live. Mora promoted to regional training director, open door policy, codified client dignity doctrine adopted. Staff applauded softly, the kind of sound that lingers longer than cheers. On the sales floor, I stepped to the small podium. The Elias Coleman Scholarship I announced will provide tuition for midlife retail workers and a stipend for low-income elder clients seeking occasion wear. A ripple of surprise, then quiet pride. Mora wiped a single tear. Dusk found me at Glenwood Cemetery. I laid the white handkerchief across Elias's stone, then folded it once, just once. I kept the line love, I whispered. The sky answered with a kind light, neither judgment nor praise. Back home on the porch, Zeb returned from his first week in the stockroom, tired but standing taller. We shared the last spoonful of cobbler. Respect first, I said. Every time he replied. I folded the handkerchief into a perfect square and set it on the table. Systems, family, legacy, each held steady, each ready for the quiet that follows work well done. As a mother who chose dignity over noise, here's what I've learned. Boundaries are love in plain clothes. Records protect the truth. And silence held long enough becomes a voice people can hear. When someone tries to shrink, you stand on values, not vengeance. Audit the facts, bless what's worthy, walk away from the rest. What would you have done at that funeral? Where has respect changed your life? If this story touched you, drop a 1 or share where you're watching from. If it didn't, tell me why I'm listening. For more true human stories, please subscribe so we can keep this conversation going.